Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Blindstone coming to you once again with another episode of Let's Look At. And today we are going to take a look at Owlboy, indie title from D-Pad Studios who set out on their own adventure to showcase the advantages of 2D games over 3D nowadays, and holy crap did they do it. It took 9 years to create and it is absolutely stunning. I'll say this. I tend to despise 2D platforming games nowadays due to Steam's lack of monitoring their green light system and how it has already allowed so many bad games to get on the Steam store, and a lot of them are just pure garbage. Without going on too much of a tangent here, a lot of those games are 2D platformer games. I'm going to say something that might offend some developers here, but 2D platformers in most engines nowadays are easy to create, whether it's in Unity or GameMaker and even Unreal 4 nowadays. Then this gem comes along and brings back my hope in full for the genre. I'll get into why this game is good in a second, but I'm not going to shy away from saying that this game got my attention and it is fun. The developers wanted to make a game that they themselves enjoy, and they weren't shy about taking the time to craft it to such a high standard. And did they ever craft it to that high standard? As always, we're going to start with our options menu. In the gameplay settings, we have Show Aim Arc. The aiming arc is used for any kind of buddy system that you have or any kind of items that you're going to be throwing. We'll get more into what the aiming arc is later on in the review. Keep mouse inside window, which is pretty self-explanatory. Show HUD, same thing, very self-explanatory. And show control prompts. Under audio, it's pretty standard. We have our master volume, our music volume, and our sound volume for sound effects. Video is pretty basic as well, as we are dealing with a 2D game after all. Full screen, which is also bound to F11 if you're using a keyboard and mouse setup. Enable VSync to reduce and get rid of any kind of screen tearing, if applicable. And letterboxing, which I'm assuming only comes into effect when you're on a lower aspect resolution, or ratio rather. One thing I did notice, however, cannot confirm for other players, is that when you go from windowed mode to full screen without vertical sync enabled, you may experience some screen tearing. This is easily fixed, however, by restarting the game once the settings have been saved. Last settings menu is our controls. The game can be played with a keyboard and mouse combo or controller. All controls are customizable, and the controller actually gives you a choice between Xbox or PlayStation controller, which is actually something that I haven't seen. It's nice to see that that's starting to be implemented. The Steam controller works well too. I played with keyboard and mouse for half of my time played, and the last half with the Steam controller in my living room. So with the settings out of the way, let's hop in game and continue, shall we? The visuals in this game are absolutely stunning. The artists took their time between the actual looks and the animation behind everything found in the game, and it shows. Animations are very fluent and smooth and scattered just everywhere. From characters to entity movement to blades of grass even. Parallaxing backgrounds and foregrounds are done at a good pace as well, not too fast and not too slow. Where the art style is pixel graphics, the developers have proceeded to call it high-bit graphics instead of just plain pixel graphics, which I think is fair to say actually. If you ever looked up a pixel art tutorial, you will quickly realize that pixel graphics have a wide range of meaning. I think calling it high-bit is fair enough, and think that the whole pixel art under one category needs to change, and this game's visual and aesthetics clearly show the reasoning as to why. Cinematic scenes have a fair amount of detail more than the actual gameplay does, but don't happen all too often. Cutscenes, on the other hand, do happen quite a bit, however it is kept quick and neat, while also getting the point across efficiently and thoroughly. Which is excellent to see because there's nothing worse than it extending its welcome. So visuals are great and well done, animations are smooth, and don't feel clunky. How about the story? Well, you play as a character named Otis, who is actually a mute, so you never will talk. He's also a student under Azio. I can't probably pronounce his name, I don't think, but I'm just going to say Azio. Azio is his mentor. You quickly find out that Otis is the underdog in this story, and his mentor is, well, an ass, to say the least. His mentor clearly states that Otis is a failure who lets everyone down after having a hard time trying to fly. Then also fumbling a pot of water, smashing it on the ground instead of helping a fire in the city. He then proceeds to tell the entire city that the reason the disaster wasn't averted was because you. It makes you walk throughout the town and asks those individuals that he told what they think of you. And it is probably one of the most real depressing moments I think I've ever seen in this genre. You literally feel useless. It really shows you what your character is going through in an earth-shattering 30 seconds roughly. It is really, really striking at how much, I don't know if I should say hate toward the character that this game has. Well, obviously not. Like you are playing the character, but just the atmosphere and what the environment that your character is in actually feels about you. The next day, you're instructed to keep watch out for pirates and to report back to Azio or the guards if you see anything. Which, of course, pirates start invading, and you are blamed for the destruction amongst your city. And now, as the story progresses, you realize that the pirates are out to destroy the capital called Advent. The reality of it being that the pirates are actually looking for 3 ancient owl relics for essentially world domination, enough power to rule everyone in fear, destruction, and chaos. Later on you find out why in depth. However, I don't want to give away any major story spoilers in this review, so I'm trying my best to veer away from the heavy, detailed information. Essentially stop the pirates, save the lands, and prove that you are no mistake at all. So, how about gameplay? You control Otis, as previously said, and you have certain moves that help with mobility, and a lot of the moves are mobility based. Running, flying, spinning, and rolling, all of these things help for certain different things. Such as spinning, it can stun some enemies and it can destroy certain objects. Spinning also is used for putting yourself out if you are on fire, which the first time I saw that, I'm like, okay, so this is actually going to be a little more in depth than I imagined. Rolling, which can also be used in the air as well to quickly move around, and is very, very useful. Which, as a bit of a side note, I feel the developers understand that the whole rolling mechanics would be used a lot for getting actually around, as the sounds for the actual mechanics that are played become reduced every time you roll concurrently, until a certain amount of time has passed since your last roll. It's well thought out. If this was an intent, then I'm quite impressed because it works very nicely. While you're flying around, you can also grab items from on the ground and move them around by placing them and throwing them. Now this is actually a major mechanic for how the game works. First off, being a puzzle platformer, and secondly, this mechanic is used for actually carrying around your buddies. Take Getty for example, Otis's best friend. He is the town's engineer and is known for his machinery and his weaponry. You first actually see him on the town's defenses. He is actually working on the main cannon to help against any kind of pirate invasion, or any kind of invasion really. He carries around a pistol which can be used for fighting off enemies, and since Otis can only stun enemies or throw items at them to get rid of them, you can actually pick up Getty with your feet when you're flying in the air, and a crosshair actually shows up on your screen at this point where you can aim. Going back to our options, it has the show aim arc, and you can actually see if there's a trajectory on the weapon that you're using, you will see that arc in play. So with Getty in your talons and you're flying around, you actually, if you're using a keyboard and mouse, you can move around the crosshair and start targeting different enemies that are on the screen and different static objects like barrels and boxes and stuff, and start breaking them down. There are also other buddies you can obtain who have different attacks, and they are used for achieving different advancements in levels. As an example, without giving character names, you gain a buddy who has a flame weapon which is used to destroy vines that you cannot pass. You actually find this buddy in the ancient owl ruins that are fairly early on in the game. Level design and puzzle design are fairly simplistic, but both work extremely well. Some of the puzzles will result in traveling from one room to the next, instead of having it all in the same area, which honestly it's nice and it's refreshing to see that kind of thought. It forces the player to think back to what they saw in previous rooms and requires a tiny bit of actual awareness of your surroundings. There also appears to be a fair amount of things you can play with, such as clouds, which when you squeeze them, it actually makes it rain, and then there's things that you can actually fill up with that water that lets you advance further into the area that you are. There are also pots to toss around, plugs to fill in holes that are in the walls or the grounds, or even the ceilings really. That'll take away your cloud if you have one that you're carrying around with you. And there's various other puzzle techniques that they have implemented, and they've done a very, very good job of implementing those as well. It's refreshing, their take on the actual puzzle mechanics. Where yes, we have seen very, very similar puzzle mechanics, they take it to a bit of a next level and actually make it more engaging. Which, honestly, that's about as far as you can really go with a 2D platformer. And they took it to that level. It needed to be done, and they did it. Some of the other puzzles actually require different buddies to help with. As I mentioned earlier, the one buddy that you will end up obtaining has the flame weapon, which destroys the vines that you have to be able to get past afterwards. One thing to note is that the puzzles don't generally give you a hand to hold either. Sometimes it may hint originally on what to do, but it's up to you to actually figure it out, which is something most games lack nowadays. I'm tired, personally, of having my hand held to accomplish my task. I think figuring it out is most of the fun behind an actual puzzle game. Don't tell me how to do the puzzle if that's my goal. On a level design side of things, the game claims to be a bit of an open world, which, to be fair, by technicality this is true. However, areas you enter are very, very linear, which is fine. I mean, it's hard to create that modern open world feel with a platformer. Let's be honest about that. With that said, for the most part, you are free to roam around towns and other areas that you already have access to. As an example, one of the first big places that you enter is the ancient owl ruins. You can progress so far and decide that you want to leave for whatever reason. You can easily go back to the town or to a shop that you visited before you actually entered that area. But there are some times that the way is blocked, so you can't really go anywhere. Which, honestly, that's going to happen in any kind of game. And they make it so minimal that actually happens, that it works very, very nicely. You are free, for the most part. Coins are a thing, just like pretty much any platformer that you play. And I mean, currency in games is not something new, and it's not something that shouldn't be there. I mean, it belongs in most games for some kind of reason, right? And with coins, they are very, I don't want to say rare, because you do actually find quite a few of them. However, they are more scarce than other games. And those coins can actually be spent at a shop. As I mentioned just previously, there is a shop just outside the hometown, and the items that you actually buy in there, as they are known as trinkets, do various different things, such as increase your maximum health. Speaking of health, there's health replenishments that can also be found as food from the ground and trees in different areas that you actually go to explore and do your adventure on. There is no inventory, so you cannot put it away for later either, which is probably the best practice for this style of game. Not going too much into controls, they are very fluent and easy to get a grasp of quickly. The only issue I've actually come across is the difference between jumping and flying initially. For example, there is one point in the ancient owl ruins where you cannot fly. Otherwise, all the enemies in that room will actually come flying at you. And they will, I think, eat you? I could be wrong on that, but I'm going to say they go to eat you. But when you go to jump, there's multiple cases where I actually started flying, and it caused exactly that. All the enemies just, the lights went on and all the enemies came flying at me, and you instantly die. So aside from that, very fluent, very smooth, very responsive. Aside from that little frustration. So some final thoughts. Aside from that control issue I just mentioned, this game has surpassed my expectations and really brings forth a whole new meaning to the 2D platformer genre. I hope that it will be used as an inspiration for other devs who are working in the genre as well. The visuals, like I said multiple times now, are absolutely stunning. The music and sound effects are really well done, and the story is great. It has really drawn to me, personally anyways. It's been a while since I've personally been grasped by this genre, and it's refreshing to enjoy it once again. I have little to no complaints about this title, and it's left me actually wanting more. The price is a wee bit high at first glimpse, however, if you purchase it and you start playing, you'll quickly realize that it is worth it. Great job to over everyone at D-Pad, and thank you so much for this gem. They are rare and few and far between. That's all I have this time. As always, if you enjoyed this episode of Let's Look At, please hit the like button down below. If you are enjoying the content we provide and want to show your support, please hit the subscribe button. If you already own Owlboy or plan on picking it up, please drop us a line, tell us your personal experience down in the comments below. This has been Blindstone, and this is No Point Gaming. Take care, everyone. Happy gaming.